So I'm going to talk some more about this this battle I kind of brought up between Simon and Mandelbrot. I'm just making this up retrospectively. It's a real thing. So and quite humorous in some ways. So we've gone through this random growth mechanism. We're simple in construction. We've seen it. So first really emerges with Simon's story, which. I went through all these catchphrases, terrible framing in his title, but he knocks it out in the abstract. It's a very universal story. And we'll get to it later on, but I touched on how it comes into play in networks. So it becomes this enormous story once more, starting in 1999 with so-called scale-free networks. So by the end of this course, you guys will know a lot about power law size distributions and this particular beautiful mechanism, which gets richer. But there are many other mechanisms, and I'm going to give you a few of them as we go along. The other one at play in here is Mandelbrot's. And I'll give you his story. I'll show you some evolution that's come after that. It's still going on, right? There's still this big argument about it. And there's some insane things that have been said over the years, which I'd like to highlight because that's what science is all about. All right. And I have some stuff that I'll read from a Zipf book. This is from 1935 to reprint in 1965, which is important because the introduction was written by someone else. The Psychobiology of Language, an Introduction to Dynamic Philology. Okay. All right, so we'll get to that. So Mandelbrot. So I've been, this is the 6th season of this course, and usually in the 7th episode, that's when big things happen. Josh Whedon stories. So we'll see if that's true, yeah. That's where the big reveals start to happen. You think, okay, a lot of Monster of the Week stories, but so, I don't know if I have it, but that's what we're building for. All right, so Mandelbrot, Benoit Mandelbrot, very famous guy, and everyone knows about him. This part, you may be enjoying fractals in chaos right now. Is that true? Go through the fractals. Yeah. They're really cool. So, so he came up with the term, and he would have reminded you of that immediately. So. Outsized egos of all these people. He would tell you that his name means almond bread, even into his 80s. Just tag that along. So lots of things you can find out. But he did a lot of other work apart from fractals on time series in financial markets, for example. He was one of the first people to point out that this whole random walk stuff is not a great model. Even so, you had the Black-Scholes equation hanging around. It's been there for a long time. It's good until it's bad, right? And then you have long-term capital, something like that, where, and I think the estimate is if you used a normal approximation for how bad the market went in, so this is Black Friday in 1987. I think it's something like the chance of that dip using a normal approximation is 1 in 10 to the 50. So probably not. Probably your model is probably wrong at that point. And so one of his big things was pointing, well, there are these heavy tail distributions. You see these statistics. Here are my reasons why. This is actually, what we'll talk about today is work that appeared in a book in 1952. It's a collection of articles. So it's an interesting piece. I think I've copied some of it out. It's refereed, of course, but there were some comments at the end with the response, which are amusing to read through. So he got to, so Zipf's law appears in 49, Zipf's story appears in 49. And as we've talked about, he doesn't really have, he talks about this principle of least effort, the Homer-Simpson idea, but he doesn't really have a hard analytic story. So immediately these characters, Simon and Mandelbrot and others, jump in and say, I'm good at that. So optimization, which has been so successful in explaining so many natural phenomena, especially mechanical systems. It's often something you want to drive a system toward if you're building. But it's true that you'll find natural systems in some ways going towards some optimized state. Evolution is more complicated than that, though, right? Hence the particles. Okay, so the idea is language is efficient. There has been evolution. come back to that later. I have some great stuff on that later on, of how language has changed. We'll also see maybe a bit later that that's not all in everyone's head. Some people think it's just randomness. What you'd like to do, of course, is communicate. So this is sort of Zipf story. You want to get as much information as possible for as little cost. So that's really still the same least effort story. But then we want to measure some things. So we'll talk about information, and I'll give you a version of information today, often written as H. So this is Shannon's measure of information, which is not at all meaning, right? Information. It's a trick. I mean, Shannon's initial paper, very famous work. Shannon's initial paper, bang, straight away says this is not about meaning. But we think information is this measure of information will give us everything. It's really, if you have this text or whatever it is, something you're describing, and you want to, and it is representative of a larger text statistically. So you think you're going to get these symbols, right? So you take Moby Dick and you count how many times the appears and how many times whale appears, and then you think, okay, the rest of everything I'm going to communicate from now on is going to be like that. We talk about harpoons and stuff like that. So you want to associate some symbol with harpoon, right? So you can send it, and if it's said a lot, then you want that symbol to be pretty small. Okay. And there are some fantastic words in Moby Dick, which I wish I could just pull out of my head. Lots of things with hyphens and maths that appear once, right? And you want to give them long symbols because you don't expect to see them. But information theory, if that measure of information presumes that you're randomly drawing from this bag of words. That's an important thing to acknowledge about information theory, or the measure of information. That you're not really going to see anything like Moby Dick. You're going to see a stream of words coming through. There'll be these happening, one in every 25 words or something like that. And you want to accommodate that. And there's no correlation between words. Right? So it's just going to be a random sequence. And so the idea is, what's the best way to, what's the most minimal way to encode this set of symbols, this material, if you like, this text, so we can get it through as efficiently as possible down this transmission line. So it does assume some it's very important to know that. It's not measuring meaning, and it's measuring the amount of, the average number of bits, that's really what it is, the average number of bits that you need per symbol to send this message. Again, presuming random orderings of symbols. So if you step out of that text, it's a bit funny. All right, so here's the game that Mandelbrot set up. So if we have this measure of information, which I'll come back to, and we have some measure of cost, so we have to come up with that. We'll see what how much it costs you to say these things. You can think about memory, you can think about various things. There's been evolution over time, and you want this to be true. So the amount of information is high, so this quantity, and you can imagine different things, h squared over c. You can imagine different constructions, but this is reasonable. So if h goes up, this quantity goes up. If c goes down, it goes up. So we're trying to, but they're correlated. You can minimize c by h. You can do other things. You can play around with it. So, right, this is a big thing. So, to what extent is there optimization in these natural systems, in systems that we've created, like the power grid, things that have kind of gone out of our scope a little bit? How much is there of optimization in there? And if you've suddenly got competing things you're trying to make work, like you want it to be robust, you want it to be efficient, those things trade off against each other in weird ways. They can be certainly incommensurate in some sense. But we don't want planes to crash, right? So we're going to be really serious about that. And that's going to incur some costs. There's some boundaries, if you talk about engineering, the design boundaries we don't want to cross. After a few generations of engineers, they cross them because they want to put a nice frill on the outside of the ship. And your bridge collapses. I think it was in the 1600s, the Dutch started building boats. I'm sure the English did. Let's say the English did. So they're always the back. So the English did it. They started to build this country. They put cannons all over it and they pushed it out and it went splat. Because they forgot about this buoyancy. Which we'd known about for a long time. But cannons are really good. So then you have to breathe. And this happens here with the planes we build. You make bigger and bigger and faster, Things happen, and we connect. It's all good, but I mean, you know, these are good intentions, but things go. All right. So what we have. So today's theme is Highlander, which is a film from before you were born. So there can only be one. There can be only one. I have to get my theory. Yeah. Excuse me. There can be only one. So in this case, this is a mortal being. So apparently, so this is true of theory, right? But also films. There should only be one of them. Anyway, great soundtrack. It's a kind of magic. Queen. It's fantastic. Freddie Mercury. Most of the songs are from Queen. Really outstanding. So if you have that in your head, you can let it run. I can't afford the rights to those. All right. Great lines in the songs. So Mandelbrot and Simon. This was in the photos. I guess I want the world to see. If I was Colbert, I would say something pretty sharp about Mandelbrot's head. But anyway. Aaron, potato farm. All right. So. Something went wrong in some experiment. It's the one where you transport two things through space and you end up getting them mixed up with a sack of potatoes with. So let's see, we have, this is, Mandelbrot is 53, I said 53. So the reference is there, that paper I've scanned and you can get at if you want. And then we have Simon later on. So we talked in depth about this. What is it? An informational theory of the statistical structure of languages. You know you're not going into my bag of bananas, but see that. So here's their little, there can be only one, right? So they start to fight. So this is 53, 55. We have Mandelbrot sees Simon's work, digests it, a note. So he goes ad hominem straight away. He's calling him out, right? So a note on a class of skew distribution function. Analysis and critique of a paper by H.A. Simon. Great. So that's right. So he's saying, "Dude, it's not good." Right? He's been very clear who he's talking about. And this is 4 years later. Obviously, with Twitter and so on, it would be much more rapid. But so then we have 960 Simon. Some further notes on a class of skew distribution functions. He's not improving the title at all. He's not helping us. Not helping us. Some further notes. But you see, he's kind of, I mean, he's going to talk about Mandelbrot in this paper, but he's not putting it in the title. It's just like, okay. So he's trying to take the high road, at least at the top. Mandelbrot, final note on a class of skew distribution functions, analysis and critique of the model due to this I don't like at all. Who would get a Nobel Prize, and I would not, but anyway. True note like Planck. So 961, reply, the final note. Benoit. So now it's okay. I'm gonna use your name. There's postscriptum to final note, and then reply to Dr. Mandelbrot's postscriptum. Right? And I think that's what they do that. So this is played out over 8 years. And so here's a couple of quotes. We should restate it. So this is Mandelbrot in detail. 59 objections. This is from 61, I think, to Simon's model. And here it's Pareto yield Zipf distribution. Right? This sticks in the middle. Our objections are valid, quite irrespectively of the sign of P-1. So that most of Simon's reply was irrelevant. Mandelbrot has proposed a new set of objections to my 55 models. The yield distribution, like his earlier objections, these are invalid. So these wouldn't have fitted into tweets. They'd have to go to the tweet. So now I have it. Much of it's gone a little bit, but these are one of the great supervillains of really outstanding. I went to college. Really great character. Okay, so this is basically where we are. So let's see if we can figure out this model. See how it stands up. It's a good plan. Seems like we would optimize our language. There's evidence for that. Let's see how we could turn that into a parallel distribution for words. So this is just going to be about words as well. It's about language. It's explicitly about language. It's not clear how this might apply to cities, which Simon's giving that figure model. Which doesn't mean it's right. Certainly people will run around saying, I have a mechanistic model. What do you have? That's not good. Okay. All right. So let's make it. So you're gonna as we usually do with these things, it's going to be sort of a toy model with enough ingredients to hopefully capture language. It's going to be a bit funny in some ways. There'll be n words. The ith word appears with probably a piece of I. Right? So we're going to go straight into this information theoretic idea of the world. There's no correlation between words, which clearly there is, right? And we have some work that's going on that's arisen out of this course. It's hopefully coming to fruition. You know, certainly in the next few months and then longer. There's more work about looking at phrases, right? You certainly want to start looking at phrases. You anticipate the next word banana that's going to come, right? I mean, you do. You have an idea of what's going to come next. All right, and your brain will have a little, get a little understand that. So, words appear randomly according to this distribution. That's obviously wrong, but I just want you to be absolutely clear that that's how composition of letters is important. We're going to break it right down into words, which is a funny thing to do. We're going to break it down into words. And so if you think about it, we certainly don't have all possible words, right? One-letter words, we have A and I, if you like, and then two-letter words. We have about 100. Scrabble fans out there will know this, depending on which set of rules they use. Right? The international ones. May I ask, Lewis? Do you have a number of two-letter words in Scrabble? Do you know off the top of your head? It used to be 98. Okay. Depends which book you're going with. Some of it's hard. I'll let you use QI and so on. I'm not into these adversarial names, but it does seem wrong to find stuff. Okay, so we certainly don't have all possible words though, right? We don't have all possible. We don't just put them all together and say we have 26 two-letter words. We have some subset, and that's an interesting problem. But let's imagine we do it. We have m letters in our alphabet, so we're going to be a little general there. And words are going to be ordered by length. So this kind of fake language will have evolved so the words we use most will be short in length. That's the idea of. She's trying to unfold the optimization into the easiness of saying these words. And it's clearly not really true. Okay, that's all right. So words are ordered by length. We're going to have to eat a few concepts. So the cost of word is going to be simply its length. As I said, optimization has figured out so we want the shortest words are going to be said the most. That's the story. This was irrelevant in Simon's model. Of course, I've said this, so real words don't use all letter sequences. So there's some subsampling and some very significant subsampling, you have to think about that. But maybe real words, maybe they're following roughly this pattern, so 3% of possible two-letter words we have there. That's roughly true for 3 or 4. You could say, words can also be encoded this way. So you have the dictionary, and then you have your encoding of them, potential encoding of them. So that's another step. You might say that, and then you could go back to our fight before. Have objections like this. All right, so there are a couple of layers here, so we're going to have to swallow a few things. So let's imagine our words. We have a binary alphabet, plus we need a space symbol. What's happening? No? Oh my God. It's not a voice in my head. No. Okay. We'll talk about that. So we have, these are going to be the words, right? Ridiculous words. 1, 1, 0, 1, 1. It's just sort of an example of what's going on. We really have an M-letter alphabet. This is just a little rough idea of what we can do. So the length of these words is 1, 2, 2, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, 12. Right? We're trying to get at the cost. So it's growing slowly, and of course it's growing logarithmically. It's 1 plus log of base 2 of I. The actual number. We're going to order the words in their binary sequence. Okay, we could do that. Of course, it's in base 2. So this is a rough way of saying, of taking all, so we're allowing all possible words, right? So we have A, B, A, C, A, D, A, whatever, it's ridiculous. We allow all of those guys. And then roughly their length is growing like this. Of course, there's going to be wrong in the middle, but it's going to be completely right when we jump up to the next length. Just tweet it. I'll do that. Live tweeting is good. Okay, so some lies, continue the lies. Okay, so this is absolutely true. So the 2kth word will have length k plus 1. So when k is 3, so this is the 8th word. What are we doing? Oh yeah, right. 2, yeah. So it's 8, 3 plus 1 is 4. Okay. 3 plus 1 is 4. As it was before. Okay, so 1 plus log 2k. So in general, we're going to make this interpolation. It's wrong, but it's roughly going to be in the middle, right? 1 plus log 2 of I. Okay, so we're taking the k plus 1, rewriting it in terms of these numbers. So that's clearly what the ith word is here. So we'll replace that by I. It's just a sort of a backwards way of getting into the story. So in general, if we have m letters, then word length of the ith word, again, ordering them from shortest to longest, is going to be 1 plus the log base m of the number of that word in the sequence. Okay, so the cost is growing logarithmically, slowly.
And that's still assuming they're using all sequences.
So you're using all of them, yeah. So you might say, all right, we use some. I mean, we could think about this, but I don't want to. It's a whole other thing. So, maybe it changes in a big way. It's a good question. I mean, I'm certainly saying this is a problem, but I haven't dug into a couple. Yeah, but you can imagine there's only some fraction of these guys. I think I've tried to do this actually. Just count up the number of words as a function of length. Maybe you guys should do that. You could do that. Okay. Right. I think it might maximize out around 3 or 4. Right? Because when you get to really long words, we're getting very few of all possible words of length 20. Incredibly few. Right. Okay, so this little lie is sort of, okay. Alright, so that's an idea. So the total cost, so that's the cost of the ith word. So imagine we have a space, so we can say, alright, let's add 1. We're just going to have 1. It's a little bit longer. It's not a big deal. The log is really the main story. There's a fixed cost for each word, so we can just get rid of that. Of course, Mandelbrot doesn't say any of this in the paper, right? It's just so I'm just trying to give a little argument for the lies that happen in here. So potato by 10. Man, that's bad. Okay, passed away. So let's see. So we have we simplify the base of the logarithm. We can do this, and whenever you have log base whatever, you can rewrite it as log of any other base that you like with a little conversion factor. Logs are delicious, but sneaky things. Think about that one. So we can turn it into natural log, because we love to differentiate those things. So the total cost, so now it's proportional to the natural log of I plus 1. We can leave our plus 1 in there. That will actually matter a little. Interesting. It's not clear that it should be just and explicitly a plus 1. But this brings us to the Mandelbrot approach. So we might want to think about that. The idea is there's a space involved, so there's a little bit of cost to taking a breath, which I never do. Okay. Some people call me repeater. Okay, all right, so let's see. So I'm just trying to go. So the total cost, if you're sampling from these words over and over, and you're just spilling them out, right, is going to be, on average, this is your average cost of filling. I'm calling it total. It's your expected cost. You could normalize it and so on. All right, okay. But basically, it's proportional to this. So we have probability of the ith word occurring, coming out of your head, and this cost, it's a modified cost, so it's simply this, right? So it's the probability of the word times the log of its index. So it's very simple. And we have n words in our language, so it's going to be I equals 1 to n. Right, so we got rid of the whole m thing, that was a little m letters. We're a sequence of clever lies, we've got to this little secret. So that's cost. So remember we were trying to get to this. measure of information divided by cost. Minimize this guy, maximize this guy. But okay, doing so, you want to move. That's not right. You're trying to maximize this thing, With the general idea is as this goes up, you want this to go down. You want to find some sweet spot where this is maximized. So trade-off. Okay, information. So we're going to use this. Shannon's entropy, very, very fast. So minus pi, log pi. And again, this is a log base 2. We'll convert that as well. But this is the... there are many ways to get to Shannon's entropy. It's a beautiful thing. But this generalized entropy, play around with that. But there's some natural reasons. So allegedly, the story is that von Neumann said, this is in the 50s, communications taking off, data, and so on. It's becoming a problem, right, to send messages. And Shannon was at Bell Labs with his very enormous brain, and he worked on other problems, and so he's like, okay, so just thought about information, right? So if we're encoding things and we want to send it in a minimal way, comes up with this measure to get a sense of, to quantify, to put a number on a text. And you can think of it as a measure of, so this is a better term actually than information. And the reason is it's much more obscure. Because information elicits all these things about information, meaning of something, right? That's all good. But to call it something like entropy is good. And that's apparently von Neumann's story. He said, we'll call it entropy because no one understands what that is anyway. So, but it has deep connections to statistical mechanical entropy and thermodynamic entropy. There's a very realness to information. I mean, people think about the effort of scrubbing a bit. So if you physically remove a bit, then there's work done, right? Work is being translated into information, back and forth. Theory could be relevant present, but there are experiments there. Okay, so we'll call it entropy. Uncertainty is another good word, surprising. So you can think about, I guess I'll say this thing. So imagine if you're just saying ook, right? The probability of saying ook is 1. The log of that one is a log of 1 is 0, but it's okay. So we're thinking about so that's in a sense, so it's 0. So it's the minimal amount of entropy that a text could have. So it's completely predictable. And so you can imagine this is a mechanical story. You have frozen ice, right? Everything is structured completely when you look at it microscopically. So you have this nice ice at a macro level. You look at it in detail, and it has this very clean structure. So what you have there is this little surprise, right? There are very few micro configurations that give you the macro story, just to try and connect it to this other. Whereas when you have a randomized mess of stuff, there's a lot of micro stories that could give you this macro thing. So the temperature and pressure we feel now, well, all those molecules could be moved around all sorts of ways and we feel exactly the same thing. But these low entropy states, which are called low entropy states like ice, there are only so many ways to configure it microscopically. That's a sort of diversion bit. This, if you think, it's a very ordered state. Right? And so if you have a random string number, or banana librarian, like just, it's unpredictable. Okay. It's unpredictable. You don't know what's coming next. Then that's your maximum entropy state. Okay? Just to give a sense of how this thing. So it turns out it's a natural measure to try to think about for complexity. How do you measure the complexity of a system? But it's maximized by randomness. So that's not quite right. So it falls down. So you have to think about something else. So in general, it's stated explicitly what it is. It's proportional to the average number of bits needed to encode each word based on frequency of occurrence. And I should add here, that's using an optimal encoding. It's an optimal encoding. Given again that you believe believe, or you're just assuming, if you like, for this measure, that there's no correlation between the bits, between the worlds. So you can think about it like this. So that this is really an average, right? So entropy is really an average of minus pi, minus log 2pi. Right? It's what we have here. It's 1 to n pi, and this is the quantity we're averaging. We're trying to find the average here before we had, say, for example, cost, C sub I. So this piece in here, this is really the minus sign we're going to put in here for minus 1. It's log of 1 over P sub I. So let's think about this. This is the minimum number of bits. You can think of this as the minimum number of bits needed to distinguish I from all the others. So if half the time you expect this ith term to appear, then you need only one bit, because you can say, okay, let's say book appears half the time. Half, so we're going to encode book with 1. Book will encode in this way. And then all other words will start with 0. Right, so we know straight away, so if we see our next term come in, if it's a 1, we have book. It's a 0, it's not book. So that would be the optimal way of encoding this, right? We wouldn't want to give book a very long string. That would be simple. If it's 1 in 64, so this is 2 to the 6, then log of 1 over 64, so it's 1 over 2 to the 6, gives us a sixth. Gives us 6, so it's 6 bits, right? Log of 1 over 64, so it's log of 64, log of 2 to the 6, gives us 6. Good. So you need 6 bits to distinguish that from all the others in it. So these are for very clean powers of 2. If we then and there are other ways to get to this, it's just a simple way to talk about it. Then if we have non-powers of 2 involved, it will generalize to log 2 of 1 over that whatever it is, right? That's a sense of an average number of bits.
I'm a little confused. So, like in English, like the word A, like a fish, a bug, whatever, like that's a word. We still have other words that start with the letter A. So why here, like look is encoded as 1, but then we can't start any words with 1?
Right, if it's going to have half the time, if I moved up from, yeah, right. It's going to be just 1. So this is going to be 0, 1, 0, 0, 1, 0, 0, 1, and then just branching from. So if we had 2 other words that appeared a quarter of the time, 0, 1, 0, 0, that would distinguish those two. Book would just become a 1. It's just being set as a 1. Then there's a space. There's another character here that's not there. There's a space character. And then you get a quarter of the time you get a 0, 1, or a 0, 0. And that would mean these others. Is that Max?
So this is also, presumably, assuming that books are indistinguishable? Because it would
sure.
different set of statistics.
Sure, unless the listener has a very special understanding of that. Right. So that goes back to this Zipf story. It could all be hooks, but the listener somehow knows what each of them means, right? Somewhere.
Because then you take into account context.
Yeah, and the way it's said, right? Yeah. So which is lost when as soon as you put it on words, you put it down. Text.
Does this kind of thing, will these follow Bose-Einstein statistics? Because they're indistinguishable, but you can fit as many of them as you want into some set, I guess, say it's.
Well, they take up space, right? So.
But you can use as many of them as you want in the same way, right? Maybe.
I mean, I think you could map it, but it's not the same space and time, right? You can't. I mean, maybe there's a way to turn that into that map. It's different fermions.
Right. Well, then, yeah.
It's language bosonic. Okay, I don't know. There are some funny transformations of different problems where people go from one to the other. Yeah. All right. So is this sort of okay? Sneaky thing. So now if we have some big spectrum of probabilities, we'll have a way of estimating the information required for each word, and then we average over all those words. And so that's what this is. So cost was simply pi times log of I plus 1. And this is pi log of pi, so with a minus sign. So you can see those two.
It seems like that maximizing H should also maximize cost, because when we have like uniform distribution,
so say that again.
if we have uniform distribution, then we have maximum entropy value, then the cost will be.
Oh, if you just want to find this, oh, you think random will maximize this one as well? Okay, yeah, is that what you're saying? So randomness maximizes H, just a joke. So the distribution that would maximize H by itself would be, by itself, p of I equals 1 over n. That would maximize this game. So that's a good thing to do, right? But once you set it up like this and you say you want to maximize, so that's true, but the cost is going to be high for this. So that's going to pull it down. It's not easy to sort of see this thing, because you're actually now we're moving through all of function space. Right? What we have is the sum of pi equals 1. Otherwise, there are no restrictions in this, right? And the pi have to be greater than or equal to 0. And to make it not silly, we'll make them all greater than 0. They're the two things. So now you can take any possible set of numbers, which is just true, there's a vector, and then stick it into this, and you're searching through all of them.
I think they are correlated, so why did he just minimize the cost?
Oh, I see. So they're not quite, okay, so we'll go through it. They're not quite correlated. They're not, right, this is pi log pi, this log of I plus 1. The cost one was pi log of I plus 1. They're different. They're different ways. As you move through this pi space, this thing behaves in a different way to the other thing. Is that okay? I mean, they're very similar looking, but they behave differently. Look, I think this is another good example where you have various skills that you've learned so far, right? Statistics, hopefully, probability, calculus, whatever calculus. The useful thing that helps you solve this problem. So what would you do for this sort of situation? What does this sound like? We're trying to maximize or minimize a probability. What do you call this thing up here? It's a word for this thing we've written down in a box, which says something about the function.
Constraint.
It's a constraint, right? So what's the thing we do? So we have a constraint. It's a constrained optimization. What's the thing we roll out of the? Okay, good. Lagrange multipliers? Yeah. You read it off the back of your eyelids, right? Inside your head. Okay, if you don't know about it, that's all right. All right, we'll do some naughty things first, which is we have PIs, we can convert it like this is log base 2. So if we stick this guy, so if it's log base 2, then this is okay. If we put it's the same, if we make it log base e with this conversion factor, it's the same as what we had before. So this is just some constant times pi log pi. It's log 2, we can get rid of that guy. That's fine. Okay, so we can turn it back into the kind of form we had, just a natural one. Good. So we're going to do this. Minimize this function. So it's a function of these n quantities. I guess I should put this greater than 0. Okay, I'll do it. But you certainly need the sum of them to be 1. So shorter words are cheaper to use, so you make them more likely. Long words are more informative, they're rarer, they're more surprise. Right? All of it. Okay, so, although not always informative. Anyway, so, okay, good. Let's do it. So let's work through the analysis. So Mr. Mandelbrot has. Okay, so we're with Lagrange multipliers, so we create this monster function. So it's going to be the thing we're trying to minimize, which is c divided by h, that property. Plus we add some multiple of the constraint. The constraint equation. Where? Here are all the goodies. Okay, so this is the piece where this is our piece that we're trying to minimize. So this is what it looks like. Now, we can still have that minus g. But okay, no. Okay, all right. Okay, we'll leave it in there. We could have gotten rid of it and just said we're just trying to c divided by h proportional to that. That's fine. Okay, so there's pi log I plus 1 on top, pi log p. Slightly different thing. So if we get anything else, it'll be a complete miracle. And then we have this constraint function. We like to write our constraint functions as something equal to 0. This is the sum of the probabilities minus 1 equals 0. Because we are good people. It's very moral, ethical. Okay. Good. We just say it's hijack. All right. So now we have a question from assignment 4 that will help you with that. Maybe join a couple of these. So there's going to be some suffering involved, and you get to this. Your suffering. So you get to this one. This pops out, which is amazing. So there's going to be some stuff in here which you'll have to deal with as well, different things. But this is actually whatever the information quantity is for this language, whatever the cost is for this language. G is a constant proportionality. This guy's just a constant. So these are all constants. It's nothing bad in there. And there's some funny combination of these guys here as well. But again, just a constant. But it's j plus 1 minus, so it's proportional to j plus 1 minus a 1 thing. So we get it out of power law, which we're thrilled about. And the exponent is alpha. Right? It depends on the entropy and the cost. Constant proportionality is there too. But what if we just got rid of that g, it would have all been absorbed. So the next step, this is part of your assignment, is to figure out lambda in terms of GC and H. We can do that. Something magical happens here. And we'll actually get this. So the probability is, as we've said, it's proportional. It's still the same story. It's j plus 1 minus some power. So we're in the ballpark. And this is probably the jth item. So this is couched in terms of Zipf's law, right? Because J is the ranking of these guys. So this is different to size distributions. Simon's model gave you a size distribution thing, and then we had to get alpha from them. Right? Alpha equals 1 over gamma minus 1. This is from size distributions. And this is the Zipf approach, the Zipf exponent. The Yule Zipf Pareto, the Zipf exponent, where you rank the items, you look at their sizes, in this case sizes are probabilities. So we have it explicitly. So this is a minus alpha, which I think is slash Simon alpha. Okay, alright. So we have to find the exponent. This is what we're going to see. So we have our constraint. So you go back and use your constraint. It's always the story with these things. You'll enjoy this as you go through. let's see what we get. So we get the sum of these guys has to be 1, straight up. We put the piece in, we know it's equal to this, there's not a proportionality, which would be problematic. J plus 1 to this minus whatever this guy is. We don't really care individually what H, G, and C are, as long as we can get this quantity, H divided by J over C. So we're just going to write it as alpha. So, this is actually the Riemann zeta function. I mean, it's not sound fantastic to say that. I mean, it's just, it's not really deep enough, but it's, well, we're starting from J equals 1, so it's J plus 1, so it starts from 2, so it's 2 to the minus alpha, 3 to the minus alpha, 4 minus alpha. And in general, the Riemann zeta function starts at 1. Alright, so there's a piece missing. So let me fix that for you. So that is pretty simple. So if we started, so if we have the sum, we're going to say that 1 equals the sum from J equals 1 to n, and we're going to let n be large, right? So that's the, we'll think about what it is when it's finite as well, but let's let that approach infinity. So this is starting at 2, so we could say this is, well, it's J equals 0 to n, this is just a side note, J plus 1 to the minus alpha, and so when J equals 0, this is 1 to the minus alpha, which is just 1. So if we have this and we subtract 1 off it, then we're back to here. So we can put this 1 on the other side and we get 2 equals the sum from J equals 0 to n of J plus 1 to the minus alpha. And if you wanted to change indices, this is the sum from K equals 1 to n of K to the minus alpha, which approaches the Riemann zeta function of alpha as n approaches infinity. And as alpha is further away from 1 than it's last. Total excitement. Thrilled. So, if you just do this in a raw way, you get alpha is 1.73. So you can just solve for this now. It's a Riemann zeta function. Okay, it's crazy. You can solve it. We can deal with it for finite n if we wanted to, but just letting n go to infinity, it's a large language. Alpha is alpha equals 1.73 pops out. So that's too high. That's a bit of a problem. So that matches up with a pretty funny, a kind of a funny value of gamma. What that is, so it's alpha equals 1 over gamma minus 1. So when gamma is 2, we get alpha equals 1, and that's kind of this is this observed value of Zipf for a lot of systems. If gamma is less than 2, then we start to get a quantity that's greater than 1. So this corresponds to, this corresponds to a gamma between 1 and 2, which, as you know very well, it means sort of an infinite mean, infinite variance. It's like the random walk case of 3 halves. So it's pretty extreme. Right, so it means that your randomly sampled word would appear very frequently. Interesting point. I don't think, actually, Mandelbrot kind of argues as far as this, but then doesn't really say exactly what it means. Now, there's some tweakability if we just sort of threw this plus 1 in to kind of account for the space. But you can see there's been a number of clever little lies that got us here. That was one of them. J plus A. That's how we get up in the morning, right? J plus A. We could change it. We could say, all right, well, let's just say, oh, we don't know what it is. Maybe it's a small number, a large number that kind of accounts for space. You think maybe it's small. So you can tweak it a little bit, and then as a function of that A, you can see how this tunes things. So maybe that's salvages. Again, try that.
typical range for values of G?
Values of
G. So,
that little,
what range might
this guy?
be? No, G.
This little one?
Yeah.
We actually, so I can't tell you because this is the only thing we end up with. You could go back and compute H and C.
We have H at a maximum of 1. Minimum 0.
I don't think you can compute G. The point is whatever you do, how you configure this at the start, you're going to compute some ratio of these two things. We could have gotten rid of G at the start, and this wouldn't even appear. It's really this ratio that matters, right? So it's H over GC. That's the only thing we care about. So that's a question, is what can it be? And so that's a problem set of questions. Can alpha, which we know is typically 1 for language at least, can that be less than 1? Can we tune this story so that we get alpha less than 1, which corresponds to gamma less than 2, which is a real thing. So we're only interested in that ratio. I don't care what G can be, or what H can be, or C. I'm interested in that ratio. As far as getting this. I mean, there's a great result. It's the parallel came out. That was a big deal. It's a very non-trivial kind of result. So you can see what happens. Like, oh, you got to get parallel. And then turns around and finds some reviews, and Herbert Simon is there. But this is a more detailed piece. It's not in his paper. We're trying to find the exponent. I mean, that's what we care about, at least, at the very least. And then we start to say, well, this is a reasonable story. I'm going to say that as you increase A, you'll see this as you increase A, you decrease alpha. That's a bit of a problem because it seems like the spaces shouldn't be too expensive. All right, so let's march on to some other pieces in here. So it's not coming out quite as beautifully as Simon's work did, right? Simon managed to get both ends of the parallel distribution, which is pretty remarkable in detail. And what was happening for small, for words that appeared only once, or only twice, or only 3 times, which are very many. From a Zipf's point of view, they're out this end, right, the highest rank ones. So, I mean, this is a very reasonable thing. Optimization is clearly happening in evolutionary processes all the time. It's not as simple as the kind of raw optimization that we like to put into all sorts of our systems. Okay, so I changed everything to elephant. Okay, so the problem with optimization now, you've got a lot of different bits and pieces in there, right? So this is how much it costs to build it, the robustness, how happy people are, right? So it's, when we get to larger systems, and from an evolutionary point of view, if you're an organism running around, being around the next day is the story, what most of our stories are about, actually. So that's the thing. So you will balance all sorts of other things to optimize that. So it falls down. Mandelbrot's still glad, obviously, as you saw. He was very convinced about himself. The cost definition is a bit of a struggle. And then, of course, we have this whole problem of, well, we're kind of accounting for it. We're allowing every possible letter combination. So we'd have to cope with that as well. Still, this has stayed as this great mystery for years. And so I'll point to a couple of things that have appeared in the last 10 years. They're saying, well, it's Mandelbrot, or it's Simon, right? Or it's both. It's both. So there can only be one chimera. And here we have a list. So people have tried to do a number of things, carry out a number of things. So there's some kind of optimization, there's some kind of random growth going on. So you see there's no growth in the Mandelbrot story. There's no narrative, so I should say, origin of the language or the system. We'll get to this one later on. This is a great, fantastic piece of work. Highly optimized tolerance. Hot. Sounds good. Well done. And this is about robustness in systems where you have these skew distributions, and the story being these skew distributions arise because of uncertainty in the environment. And this actually connects nicely to two big areas, the things that we've engineered, but also what evolution has produced. And the basic idea is sort of a boundary idea, so that you have some limited number of resources you could deploy to protect yourself from calamity. And we'll come back to this, but it's fire. So the paradigmatic example is forest fire. So you can only spend so much time and money building fire breaks. And so if there's a big area where very, very rarely have lightning strikes, then you're not going to crisscross all over the place. You put a big boundary around it. If there are lots of lightning strikes potentially happening here, you put closer and closer boundaries. And that so you're matching the uncertainty. You're trying to match the uncertainty. And it doesn't have to be, this is this Pliplo story, right? You don't have to have this really nasty uncertainty. You can just have kind of a Gaussian distribution. Some unevenness turns into the kind of defense that you build has your system. It's not just physical stuff. It's informational stuff as well. You start to naturally build your structures so that they actually have a power law size distribution. So what happens is, if things change or you're unlucky, everything goes wrong. So it's a big story. We'll come to that one. It goes up against a particular self-organized criticality. If nothing else, people have been really good at coming up with names. Right? There's a number of pieces that have come out of Soleil. I think they're very characteristic. Part of them usually is multiple paper, where they dig all this up again and sort of hold Zipf story up again. These are physicists, well, they're not all physicists, they're sort of a physics story. Rice and D'Souza, who I went to, had a piece in PNAS, kind of getting at this again, trying to say that it's a mixture again of optimization and randomness, with both. So let's see, what else do we have? Earlier than that, there's this whole, it was disparaged at some period of time where there's a paper from 57, you can look this up, that says Zipf's law is just an artifact of any kind of apparent, any text you put down will have it. And it goes on at length about having monkeys type would produce Zipf's law. So there's a paper from, I have it down here that says no, that's not true, but it's from 2010. I think Miller, we're going to read out some of the stuff here. Miller was behind this idea that you can only remember 7 things, 7 digits. Remember this? Like the people's working memories can handle about 7. It's a phone number amount. Okay. You give them 8 or 9, you start to struggle. He was I think a psychologist at Harvard. Anyway, they were colleagues. So this book, it's a reprint from 1965. It's an older book. It's 1935. So Miller writes the what's it called? The introduction. Yeah. So I'm going to read you the preface. So this is from Zipf, who's passed away by this point. He's been dead for 16 years. So nearly 10 years ago, while studying linguistics at the University of Berlin, it occurred to me that it might be fruitful to investigate speech as a natural phenomenon, much as a physiologist may study the beating of a heart, or an entomologist the tropisms of an insect, or an ornithologist the nesting habits of a bird. That is, speech was to be regarded as a peculiar form of behavior of a very unusual extant species. I will sit outside of humans and watch the humans. Always fun. Whenever people start talking about the humans, you know you're in trouble. And for the greater good, that's always fun. It was to be investigated in the manner of the exact sciences by the direct application of statistical principles to the objective speech phenomenon. It's very, this more. And he ends with saying, I think it would be appealing to linguists, blah, 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 but really anyone, from the angle of biological, sociological, psychological sciences, or from the angle of aesthetics, the whole list. So he's having a great time, all right? He gets very excited. But then he's tacked on this introduction. So this book is not calculated to please every taste. Zipf was the kind of man who would take roses apart to count their petals. If it violates your sense of values to tabulate the different words in the Shakespearean sonnet, this is not a book for you. Zipf took a scientist's view of language. For him, that meant the statistical analysis of language, the biological, psychological, social process. If such analysis repels you, then leave your language alone and avoid Zipf like the plague. You'll be happier reading Mark Twain, There are liars, damn liars, and statisticians, or Arden, Thou shalt not sit with statisticians nor commit asocial science. Some good stuff in here. However, for those who do not flinch to see beauty murdered in a good cause, Zipf scientific exertions yielded some wonderfully unexpected results that boggle the mind and tease the imagination. Anyway, so he goes on about this stuff, and then he says, unfortunately, so he describes what Zipf curves are, unfortunately, he was wrong. Nearly 30 years later, it seems clear the others were right. Zipf curves are merely one way to express a necessary consequence of regarding a message source as a stochastic process. Just terrific. This is really interesting. He talks about monkeys. So Zipf was wrong. His facts were right enough, but not his explanations. So actually, he mentioned a few other things I want to point out. Begin with the assumption that a concept is a bundle of semantic features or genes of meaning, which Dawkins, for all his problems, ended up calling memes, which are very problematic as well, but it's funny to see that. And then he has a little thing. He was born here, he lived here, he did these things, and he died on September 25th, 1950. I mean, maybe he killed it. Like, you just don't know. It's like he died. He was a human. Anyway, so it's kind of a funny business. He just says, yeah, it's all wrong. Read it. You can read more of that. It's fun. Okay, so he gets to slap him around, and as I said, so you can just slap him around by simply reading his words out. Genes of language is a good thing. So random text did not exhibit the real Zipf's law like language. Right? And it talks about monkeys. They're talking about monkeys. Okay, then we have this theory of monkeys. I guess I could go into some more, but that's probably enough. I mean, myself, I could actually. So, okay, so some extra silliness, and then I think will be good. So, this book, which I popped off my bookshelf the other day. So, the self-organizing economy. Krugman touts this law for cities and the model. I came across this. There's a little bit of people using each other. There's a paper from 1999's Deja Vu, Mr. Krugman's substantial work done by other geographers. So we know all this. Being there, done that. This is quite actually. Now it's called the Simon injury model. Was introduced to geographers in 1958 as an explanation of such distributions. There was many such contributions built steady states of random growth processes. But then I suppose even if Krugman had known about these studies, they would have been discounted because they were not written by professional economists or published in one of the top 5 journals in economics. Feel my rage. I'm an urban geographer. Krugman needs to exercise some humility. Interesting. For his worldview was circumscribed by folkways that militate against by English and scholarship of scholarship. That is this frontier. So there's a little self. I mean, I'm going to give him credit and say that's some self-awareness. Okay, so they're not so self-reflective. Okay. So there's a paper from a few years ago. There's a certain amount of work. I think I can close off with this stuff here. So Didier Simonet, a very famous character, he's an EDT assurer, he's done a lot of stuff, all sorts of areas, geophysics, coming from physics, but more recently a lot of stuff in financial work, trying to predict financial crashes, being so bold as to say, this is what I think will happen, put in a box somewhere, and then say, we're going to open on September 1st. So I don't know how he's gone with that, but he's pretty brave. So, looking at, I mentioned this earlier, so this is looking at the Linux distribution, and you can see how the thing has grown, right, with a good data on how this thing has grown. I threw this at the start. It's good evidence, it turns out, for the Simon type model, this random growth type model. So you can see how this is going to be somewhat hard to tease out, right, because you want to see that at every stage the probability of attaching to something is proportional to its size. But of course, at every stage you have one example. If you think about it, not in time necessarily, but you just order the events that happen, right? So an event-driven thing. So, okay, there's a new module created, it connects all of these points to be added. So the argument here, this is physical review letters, is that, so still argument, this is 50 years after. 50 years after this thing came out. And they're clearly written. Mandelbrot's a bit whatever, but you know, Simon's clearly written. This is looking at this etch. The guy who invented etch a sketch just died. So this is right. This is from Toy Story. So they named all their releases after the characters in Toy Story. So etch. Roll. What's the okay, so let's see. So these are given the number of connections coming in, there's a chance you get a change over some time period, and so it's on a log scale, so it's been funny, but you see it reported a constant proportionality. You see it with constant proportionality. So things that have more connections have more of a chance of being connected. It's a bit screwy for the smaller guys, and this is stochasticity. Not bad, not bad. It's not bad. There's some earlier work. This is for the web. And this actually will come back to the scale 3 network model. It's a big, big story. Go back to the later one, talk about complex networks. But that appeared in 1999, and so there's some work where, oh, by the way, this is what we've done in other ways. It's fair from the science branch. So this work showed that Simon's model did very, very well for, again, a data set. So we had this rose of probably a new flavor appears. And then data from Alta Vista, which we were born with a search engine. I think it's actually dead. It's close to dead. Maybe. So they have about 6 months of crawls showing the web progress. They have some idea. This is a long time ago. It's 1999. The web wasn't quite as big. It's a little more organic. You know, web's many bots creating things. And then, so they can see that the rate of new links in the system and network service is a place. A new website service is 0.1. It's links. I have to think of this. I have to read this, but it has to be the new. It has to be the new stuff, new pages. They get a pretty good match though, right? So they get gamma. So that would be an estimate of this exponent gamma. It's 1 plus 1 over the long-range road. This is where from Simon's model. So Simon has this very great thing built into it, which I should reiterate. Which is, here's the micro story, just to say that it's the micro story. Rho is the probability of a new flavor appearing. Very simple, measurable. You can measure this. We haven't measured it for, you've got enough data, you can see the rate at which things are appearing. And you can see if it's linear or not, and then it's a different story if it's not. That presumption is it's linear. But it does appear to be roughly true over this 6-month period. And Simon's model has this, as we talked about, this tunability. So there isn't this one special class that depends very much. There is a mechanism, it's this growth mechanism. But then the rate of influx of new pieces will dictate this as well. You can imagine that changing over time, so it's a complication. But if this is 0.1, then just a Taylor approximation, this is roughly 1 over 1 minus x is approximately 1 plus x. So it's roughly 1 plus 0.1. So it's 1 plus 1, so 2.1. And then they have a direct measurement of gamma. And which I don't know if they did, but they pointed out that it's 2.1 plus 1, so 1, and another one 2.09. So that's a pretty strong result. Got a little variable, but that result gives you some of it. So we'll come to it, but the Barabasian model didn't have any of this tunability. Right? It actually just predicted an exponent of 3, downwards 3. That's it. Didn't have any, there's no rate of introduction. It just, everything was new all the time. So, here's the nutshell. So, this rich net richer, the rich net richer type models zero degree in detail when you look at some of these systems where it's a clear growth process, it's a clear ability to copy, to link. If links are costly, then it's a different ballgame, but it's not in principle costly when you're creating a new distribution or when you're working with words to replicate. There's some it's different than making things out of wood or something like that, where it's hard work. You still get, Mandelbrot gets a power around, so there's still some sense that there's an oddness here that for a random process you get something that has an optimal feel to it. That's kind of a sort of, so it's this point, right? So optimality seems to arise roughly for free in these so-called random competitive replication models. Again, you still have to look at every system that you have, see if you have this kind of mechanism in detail going on. Optimization is a harder thing to measure for perhaps in language directly. It's not really invoking an obvious process. It's a bit like natural evolution, where you just say it in a very broad term, you get with the details. So, things seem to have been borne out well. I'm sure they'd still be arguing if they were around today. That's what they did professionally. Built into their heads, but it seems to me that Simon's model is the stronger one. It's a beautiful model. Obviously you have to tweak it in various ways to get it to replicate your exact system in front of you, but it's a very profound kind of mechanism that has appeared over and over and over again in nature. I will say this at the end, there are many different mechanisms to live with many different powers, very different to the normal distribution, which you see for one beautiful story, the central limit theorem. There are many different kinds of parallel distributions, many different stories for them, but there are some stories are more equal than others. Right? There are some stories that are more dominant, that recur, that you find. And this is exactly what Simon was getting at. 55, I think. Well done. So, good. So on Thursday, well, I'm not sure what I'll talk about Thursday. I'll have to arrange my brain for that. But the next stage here is robustness. We're going to talk about how these systems collapse. I don't think I can help the NFL, but it will touch on that kind of story. Okay, very good.